What if the devil in Brazil isn't a joke, but a sign? In a country where Christianity dominates and the name Lucifer is whispered in fear, one man dared to laugh in public. Dressed in red with a flowing cape and trident in hand, he called himself Toninho do Diabo, and before the cameras, he declared, "I'm the official representative of the Dark One on Earth." But what looked like a parody hid something older, heavier, and far darker. The first church of the devil, founded in the back alleys of Brazil's misunderstood spiritual landscape, may have only scratched the surface of a deeper pact. A pact of symbols, twisted beliefs, and a name many fear to speak. Why does the country of syncretism still flinch at the devil? Back in the 1990s, when Toninho's name exploded across Brazil's tabloid media, few noticed the subtext. He was saying what others were too afraid to. An alternative faith, wrapped in mockery but rooted in the shadows of forbidden texts. His so-called Church of the Devil wasn't just spectacle, it was protest. It was heresy. While priests condemned him and pastors shouted, Toninho kept smiling. But what was behind that smile? Was Lucifer truly the same devil Toninho portrayed? Or were they on opposite sides of a silent war? That's where the secret begins. According to forgotten Brazilian occultists and rare documents found in obscure forums and off-the-map libraries, the name Toninho do Diabo was inspired by entities that don't belong to traditional demonology, a fusion between the trickster of Afro-Brazilian religions and the biblical adversary. A hybrid entity, masked, comical, and terrifying. What if the satire was just a disguise for real heresy? In the church's early form, there were no black masses or gruesome rituals. There were symbols, declarations, direct provocations against the clergy, the state and the media. It was theater, but every ritual begins with theater. From the Eleusinian mysteries to Christian homilies. In an old pamphlet from the Forbidden Church, one disturbing line stands out. God lies, the devil reveals. Satanic or symbolic? Toninho's exaggerated persona, wrapped in mockery, may have concealed the trail of something ancient, a hidden spiritual movement that used humor as a shield and provocation as a sword. And at the center of it all was a name avoided, but never denied. Lucifer. But why was he never invoked directly? The answer may lie in a profound split between the archetypal Lucifer, the light bringer, and the cartoonish devil played by Toninho. A symbolic conflict that speaks volumes about Brazil, its religions, and its fears. What if Lucifer never accepted Toninho as his image? That's the thread most people missed. Toninho claimed to speak for the devil, but in serious occult circles, some say he was rejected by the very forces he tried to represent, as if his public, theatrical image was not only insufficient, but dangerous. Who was Toninho do Diabo, really? A profane clown? An alternative priest? Or a symbolic agent used to mock or conceal deeper truths? The first door was opened, but what lies beyond it? Why did the Catholic Church refuse to comment on the existence of the first Church of the Devil in Brazil? What most people don't know is that Toninho do Diabo was silenced by something far darker than public ridicule. What do you think about this? Tell us in the comments. And what if Toninho do Diabo was never alone on stage? After Toninho's media explosion, what many overlooked was the silence that followed. A strange, tense silence, especially within Brazil's esoteric circles. Behind the scenes, in spiritual centers, occult orders and Gnostic groups, one whispered question echoed. Who was really using Toninho? Because no symbol moves on its own. In the esoteric tradition, every body is a vessel. Every performance is an invocation. But what exactly was being invoked? Toninho spoke like a prophet of the devil. But those who studied his earliest appearances noticed something beyond the parody. A trail of hidden names, ritual gestures and phrases taken from grimoires like the Grand Grimoire, the Book of Saint Cyprian, and even excerpts from Liber Falcifer. None of it was accidental. While the public laughed, trained eyes saw the signs. In a forgotten 1999 interview, Toninho let something slip. "I'm the voice of what you don't understand." And that's where the image of Lucifer separates from the media's devil. In ancient occult manuscripts, Lucifer isn't just the Lord of Darkness. He's the bearer of hidden light, the truth that wounds. The popular devil, the one with the trident and sarcastic grin, was forged by the church to instill fear. So what was Toninho really representing? A shadow, constructed to hide a forbidden light. According to former members of Toninho's church, which was never officially registered but held private rituals in underground locations around São Paulo, there was an altar. And on that altar, it wasn't just laughter that was worshipped. It was something older, something even traditional Satanists found disturbing. Lucifer's mirror, what is it? It's an ancient archetype found in forbidden grimoires, a ritual mirror where the initiate doesn't see the devil, but themselves as part of the original rebellion, a mirror that reveals the divine spark within the fallen being. This ritual, practiced outside Toninho's theatrical church, it was considered dangerous by more orthodox esoteric orders. What if Toninho's church was just a disguise for a radical spiritual experiment? Beneath the satire there was a hidden rite, the rite of symbolic inversion, where laughter at God wasn't disbelief, but clarity. It wasn't worship of evil, it was a revelation, a protest, and that, to the system, was far more dangerous. In 2003, one of the secret attendees was found dead. The official cause, suicide. But he had left behind a torn piece of paper with a chilling phrase. The mirror opened, and I couldn't bear it. A manuscript found with his body mentioned the name Azazel, and made a clear distinction between Lucifer and the devil Toninho portrayed. The document claimed that Toninho, while in a trance, had been visited by an entity, one that wasn't what he expected. "Do not call me devil. I am the first light that fell." That phrase echoed among occult researchers, who began to take the case more seriously. A new theory emerged. Toninho hadn't contacted the popular archetype of the devil, but Lucifer himself. And what followed was suppression, erasure, and defamation. What if the forbidden church was never destroyed, but forcibly hidden? Behind the scenes of television, Toninho was silenced. But in secret rituals, the name Lucifer began to be whispered by others, with more reverence than ever before. If this moved you, like this video and hit the hype button to help spread the word. What if calling Lucifer the devil is the greatest theological mistake in history? In the secret rituals surrounding the so-called forbidden church, something unusual began to happen. The traditional symbols of hell tridents, horns, and flames started disappearing from the altars. In their place, mirrors, books, black and white candles, and one name whispered not in fear, but in awe, Lucifer. Was the image Toninho acted out on camera being denied behind closed doors? The answer may lie in one of the most controversial texts recovered by occultists from the traditional Luciferian path, a supposed apocryphal gospel translated from Coptic, titled The Book of Hesidiel. In it, an entity presenting itself as the first guardian of fallen truth declares, "I was cast out for saying what others refused to speak. I'm not evil. I am the refusal to obey silence." That description doesn't align with the biblical devil taught in mainstream religion, but it perfectly matches the symbolic Lucifer found in Gnostic, Rosicrucian, and modern ceremonial magic traditions. And this is where the internal conflict of the Forbidden Church begins. Former members began reporting two factions among Toninho's followers. One, those who followed the character as a form of cultural provocation and symbolic rebellion. Two, and those who believed Toninho had received a genuine calling, but was playing with forces he didn't fully understand. But what if he realized it too late? One of the most shocking accounts describes a ritual from 2005, recorded in audio and hidden for nearly a decade. In it, Toninho, away from the cameras, recites an invocation not to the devil, but to a name found in the Book of Enoch, Semyaza. Semyaza is one of the fallen angels who, according to apocryphal tradition, took part in the original rebellion against the divine order, not out of evil, but out of love for forbidden knowledge. Did Toninho discover that the devil he portrayed was just an invention? Some say yes, and that this realization led him to try and change his own image, But it was already too late. The media, the pastors, and even traditional Satanist groups had labeled him. In another document, recovered by an occult collector from Curitiba, there's a transcribed excerpt from a private speech Toninho gave. They want the devil of fear, but the one who appeared to me was the devil of light. His name was different, his glow unbearable. This phrase echoes a symbol from the Luciferian tradition, knowledge that frees but comes at a price. And what if the real hell is opening your eyes and never being able to close them again? Tension within the church grew. According to sources close to him, Toninho began a new phase of deeper studies and more serious rituals. No more laughter, but reverence. He wanted to create a new path, one now dedicated to Lucifer as the bearer of truth, not as a parody. It was around this time that he disappeared from mainstream media. A theory began to circulate among occult researchers. Toninho was silenced for trying to show that Lucifer and the devil were not the same being, and who would benefit from keeping that confusion alive. The system needed a devil that was easy to hate, and Toninho was getting too close to a Lucifer people might understand. Subscribe. What comes next gets even darker. And what if the real danger isn't worshipping the devil, but trying to understand Lucifer? Toninho do Diabo vanished from mainstream television almost overnight. The man who once ruled sensationalist stages with a trident and loud laughter was gradually erased from public view. But he didn't disappear. He simply descended into the symbolic underground, where laughter gave way to silence, and parody turned into ritual. And that's exactly when the signs of repression began. Anonymous reports suggest that gatherings from the so-called second phase of the Forbidden Church, now without any official name, were disrupted by unidentified forces. It wasn't the police, it wasn't the military. It was something less visible. At one of these meetings, held at a rural property near Atibaia, symbols were destroyed, books were seized, and people vanished. There were no police reports. No official records, just silence. Why such force against a group that on the surface was just folklore? The answer may lie in the content of the rituals that were being performed. Readings from banned Gnostic texts, invocations of Lucifer as the reflection of the forgotten god, open challenges to traditional Christian doctrine. According to a manuscript translated by a former member of the Brazilian Rosicrucians, one of the central texts from those gatherings stated, God created ignorance to control. Lucifer rebelled to bring light. This kind of idea is considered pure heresy within Christianity. But more than that, it's dangerous because if taken seriously, it dismantles the dualism that has upheld centuries of fear. It takes power away from hell and gives it back to the individual's consciousness. And those who control faith, fear awakening. Documents circulated in esoteric forums between 2007 and 2010 claimed that Toninho's activities were being monitored, not by churches, but by shadowy sectors of the state. Why? Because, according to those texts, Toninho's symbolic Luciferian movement had begun attracting young people, artists and religious dissidents. And not as a joke, laughter became a symbol. The symbol became a language, and the language became a threat. What if Toninho do Diabo was just the bait? A former ufologist and occultist from São Paulo claims that Toninho was never the true initiator of the rituals, but merely the public face. Behind him, there was a smaller circle, an unregistered council. They didn't appear on TV. They wrote, invoked, guided. And this inner cell, referred to in some texts as the reflection that burns the light, is said to have done what no one else dared. Reinterpret the apocalypse through a Luciferian lens. The end is not destruction. It is revelation. This reading flips everything. The devil is no longer the villain. Lucifer is no longer the rebel. And God may not be who everyone thinks he is. This isn't just occultism. It's spiritual subversion at its core. Toninho, in trying to merge satire with symbolism, may have unintentionally become the prophet of something much larger. And the system, religious, political, institutional, responded the only way it could, by erasing him. But the question remains, what if the image of Toninho do Diabo was just the surface of a much greater force? One that still lives on today. While the country forgot Toninho, other names began to rise, and none of them were just playing with the devil. Share this with someone who needs to see what was hidden. What if Lucifer's true name was never revealed, out of fear of what it might unleash? After the public disappearance of Toninho do Diabo, something began to shift, quietly, beyond the reach of the media, outside popular understanding. The so-called forbidden church didn't die. It was torn apart and reborn. New branches emerged, smaller cells, more secretive rituals, and above all, even darker secrets. One of them revolved around a forbidden name. Recovered documents from Brazilian esoteric archives suggest that within the inner circle of the old sect, Lucifer was never referred to by that name. Instead, they used a name almost unrecognizable, found only in a shadowy line of Ethiopian apocryphal texts, Eliëon Luziel. According to the initiated, this name represents Lucifer before the fall, a version of the light-bearer, still untouched by corruption, the Lucifer that still carried the divine spark. Before separation, before myth, invoking this name was strictly forbidden outside the ritual. And according to accounts, anyone who dared to speak it without being mentally and symbolically purified would fall ill or disappear. Was it just superstition? Or was there something far more real and dangerous about uttering the true name of the bearer of light? The cult evolved. Rituals began to take place at midnight, in abandoned locations, shuttered theaters, demolished churches, forgotten silos. The goal, the symbolic redefinition of evil, a spiritual catharsis where participants reenacted their own descent and resurrection. Hell was not a place, it was a phase, and those who understood this would be reborn. One former participant described seeing something during a ritual that he couldn't explain. Toninho's face appeared in the mirror, but behind him there was another face. And in that reflection, it wasn't him anymore. That testimony, paired with numerous occult references, points toward the idea of symbolic or even spiritual possession. A transfer, a channel. Perhaps Toninho's laughter was, for a time, the perfect disguise for an older consciousness to emerge. What if Lucifer didn't use Toninho as a servant, but as a gateway? This theory gained traction after a handwritten document, allegedly penned by Toninho himself, was discovered years later in a private collection owned by an esoteric scholar in Goiânia. The title of the text, "The Fire That Burns Behind the Eyes." One passage stands out. "The devil you see is me, but the Lucifer who sees me is awake." Awake from where? From what time? From which plane? Esoteric tradition teaches that certain archetypes like Lucifer aren't beings with form, but conscious ideas that awaken within those who understand them. Through theatrical immersion, Toninho may have crossed an invisible line, that of true invocation. In the French text linked to Martinism, it is written, "He who pretends to be Lucifer without preparation will be possessed by his light, and too much light burns the ego." And that's exactly what happened to Toninho. His image was consumed by a symbolism he himself ignited. But what if the laughter was only the beginning of an exorcism, one meant to cast out collective ignorance? The entity behind Toninho never disappeared. On the contrary, it chose new bodies, new voices, and a new mission. Have you ever thought about that? Share your thoughts in the comments. Let's dive even deeper into the symbolic abyss between representation, ritual, and forbidden truth. What if Toninho's theatrical performance was hiding a real and silent sacrifice? For years, Toninho do Diabo's public persona was tied to comedy. But behind the scenes of the old forbidden church, a new kind of ritual began to take shape without an audience, without cameras, without laughter. A type of rite some called the performance of burning light. Others a simulacrum of blood. The problem? None of it was just symbolic. Hidden documents, retrieved by researchers, tracking Luciferian movements in Brazil, describe rituals where blood was indeed used, not animal blood, Not theatrical blood, but small voluntary cuts made by the initiates themselves. A kind of intimate pact, not with the devil, but with their hidden self. What if the real sacrifice was identity? In the texts recovered from these gatherings, one sentence kept repeating, "For the light to enter, something must bleed." According to records, this practice was inspired by ancient Gnostic rites of the Cathars, medieval heretics persecuted by Rome for rejecting the Creator God. They believed a divine spark was trapped inside the flesh, and that blood was the seal between spirit and prison. This heresy resurfaced during the deep phase of Toninho's church. But now, with Lucifer at the center of the gnosis. So, what really happened during those rituals? Former members described dark rooms, mirrors placed in an inverted cross, and a single black candle in the center. In total silence, participants would cut their arms and let the blood drip onto pages of ancient texts, where the name Eliëon Luziel was always handwritten. Those blood-stained fragments were then burned in a ceremony, known as the release of the final veil. The goal? Symbolically reject the god of guilt and embrace the light of the fall as a form of redemption. But what if it wasn't just symbolic? One of the biggest red flags surfaced when a ritual was interrupted due to an anonymous tip. Officially, nothing was found. But a leaked audio from one of the officers present said there was something weird in there. People in a trance, and that symbol, it was ancient, very ancient. What symbol? The so-called seal of the reverse prayer, a ritual diagram combining the Kabbalistic tree of life with a Eliphaz, Levi's inverted pentagram, a symbol so rare and intricate, it doesn't even circulate in mainstream occult circles. It's believed to represent the inverse path to illumination. Light, but through darkness. What happens when someone tries to ascend through the shadows? That was the heart of Toninho's hidden cult, the most secret one. The part left out of interviews and theatrical marches. The part no newspaper ever touched. Because what was being practiced wasn't Satanism. It was esoteric Luciferianism, influenced by Gnosticism, occultism, and Kabbalah. A belief system that declared God lies. The fallen one sets you free. One passage from a translated grimoire read, "The light of God wounds those who sleep. The light of the fallen awakens those who burn." That changes everything. Because here, evil is no longer evil. Good is no longer good. It's all about awakening. And awakening hurts. What if the real hell is waking up and realizing you've been on the wrong side all along? And it was when the blood touched the paper that the forbidden name began to glow and the consequences became real. Like this, if any part of this made you feel uncomfortable. And what if the entity that once possessed Toninho never really left? What if it's now inside other bodies? After the blood and mirror rituals, something in Toninho changed. He began avoiding interviews. His speech slowed. His eyes became more intense. People close to him said, he's too different for this to be just exhaustion. The laughter that once filled his speeches became a tense, heavy silence. And that's when occultists began to fear the worst. Archetypal possession. But what does that mean? Unlike the classic demonic possession, made popular by Christianity, where a spirit seizes control of the body, archetypal possession is more subtle and far more dangerous. It happens when a living symbol, a conscious myth, seeps so deeply into someone's psyche that it starts to live through them. The body is the same, but the one inside is not. In rituals described within the Codex del Luciferus, a forbidden handwritten Luciferian manual, one line stands out. The fallen one doesn't enter. He awakens within. This is what they believe happened to Toninho. According to people close to him, he began compulsively writing in languages he didn't know, mentioning the names of fallen angels from the Book of Enoch, like Penemu, Azazel, and Gadriel, beings associated with forbidden teachings and the liberation of knowledge. A note found in one of Toninho's old notebooks in 2011 read, "The performance was mine, but now the voice isn't." What if Toninho became an unwilling medium for a force far older than he ever imagined? The symptoms continued: memory loss, public trances, reciting Bible verses backward, and most disturbingly, a complete rejection of the name devil. He began refusing that title, claiming, "The devil is a word created by those who fear what they refuse to understand." He no longer called himself Toninho of the devil. Now, he said he was the reflection of the cold flame, a symbolic name that directly echoes the Gnostic concept of the soul's fire, a flame that burns but does not consume, the energy of consciousness that does not obey, does not serve, does not bow. And that's where the second disappearance began, not just of Toninho's public persona, but of other members of the hidden church. Many left their lives behind, jobs, social media, everything. They vanished. But the strangest part was the appearance of new public figures, young people, artists, activists, using phrases eerily similar to the old forbidden doctrine. In songs, in visual art, in cryptic speeches. There is no fall without revelation. The light asks for no permission. The mirror never lies, even when you can't stand the reflection. It was as if the entity had escaped Toninho's persona and spread like a symbolic virus. In occult circles, they began talking about the shared flame, a theory suggesting that once archetypes are awakened, they no longer need a host. They replicate, they jump from mind to mind. They live through words, through symbols, through repetition. What if the cult never ended? It simply evolved? What if the true purpose of the forbidden church was never to build a temple, but to crack open reality itself? The man vanished, but the words kept showing up, as if Lucifer himself had found a new way to exist. Subscribe. The truth doesn't stop here. What if Lucifer's new religion is already among us, but no one dares to name it? After Toninho's slow disappearance, people expected the world to forget. But the opposite happened, a quiet expansion. The ritual stopped. The physical gatherings dissolved, but the message kept spreading. Like an ember that doesn't die, it simply changes form. The forbidden church died as a structure, but it was reborn as cultural influence. Fragments of rituals began showing up in alternative music lyrics. Encoded phrases started appearing in urban murals across cities like São Paulo, Recife, and Belo Horizonte. Artists began tattooing symbols tied to Toninho's occult cult, the inverted mirror, the open cross, the sigil of wounded light. But why doesn't anyone talk about it openly? Because what once looked like a caricature has now become a symbolic virus, and no one wants to admit they've been infected. In a 2018 interview, a famous Brazilian rapper was asked about the origin of certain cryptic phrases in his album. He answered, "They're echoes, things I heard from those who've seen too much." Then quietly, he raised 3 fingers in the shape of an inverted trident, a gesture that had previously appeared in Toninho's secret cults. Coincidence? Or continuity? According to experts in cultural symbology, what followed Toninho's public downfall was the rise of a new kind of language, hidden, underground, non-religious, yet deeply spiritual, a kind of unconscious Luciferianism. This idea was documented by a French researcher in an academic paper titled Le Feu dans la culture brésilienne moderne. In it, one passage stands out. When an idea is banned for 1,000 years, it doesn't die. It learns how to disguise itself, and that disguise has worked. Lectures on radical self-knowledge at holistic centers. Influencers talking about the light that disturbs. Theater performances structured identically to rituals of the forbidden church. But what if this is all part of something much older? Unofficial reports, collected by religious watch groups, suggest that Luciferian symbolism hasn't just spread. It's become accepted in certain circles. People don't say Lucifer. They say enlightenment beyond religion. They don't say the fall. They celebrate liberating disobedience. The form changed. The essence didn't. One phrase found graffitied near universities, translated from occult Latin, read, "Light without permission, truth without filter, chaos with purpose." And here's the most disturbing part. According to a leaked internal report from a theological research center in southern Brazil, there's evidence that theology and philosophy students are secretly studying the apocryphal material of Toninho, not as a joke, but as a foundation for alternative spiritual thinking. What if the next generation of religious leaders is being shaped under the influence of an invisible cult? An invisible religion doesn't need a temple. It doesn't need clergy. It only needs symbols that bleed into language. The real question isn't whether the forbidden church is gone. It's how many invisible churches already exist within you. Tag someone who would dare to watch this till the end. What if the biggest secret about Toninho do Diabo is that he was never a joke to those who knew? For decades, Toninho was paraded as a folk character, a convenient caricature for entertainment. But behind closed doors, in discreet meetings between religious leaders, spiritual councils, and even cultural intelligence agencies, he was never treated like a joke, because those who read the right texts understood. What Toninho said while laughing, others whispered in fear. Internal CNBB reports from 2009 to 2013 mentioned the possible infiltration of symbolic Luciferian language among Brazilian youth, especially within artistic movements and alternative study groups. The term philosophical toninhism was even informally noted as an emerging concern. But why such fear of a clown with a trident? Because Toninho embodied perfect subversion. He challenged without attacking. He laughed while telling the truth. That he exposed the paradoxes of faith without ever seeming dangerous. And that is exactly what made him dangerous. A character who pointed his finger at the sacred while making people laugh. It was impossible to censor him without becoming exactly what he was mocking. The church couldn't confront him directly. The state ignored him publicly. But behind the scenes, they were watching. In a leaked 2015 email exchange between members of an interfaith commission, one passage read, "Toninho isn't a problem because he invokes the devil. He's a problem because he's awakening the symbolic Lucifer in the youth. And that Lucifer, they have no idea how to fight." Here comes the most brutal twist in this entire story. Toninho was used. Sources close to him claimed he was approached, shortly before his final disappearance, by representatives of an interinstitutional alliance. The goal: silence him, corrupt him, or turn him into a product. Toninho's last public appearance as an entertainer took place at an event sponsored by a major TV network. And after that, he was never seen again. Was the cult shut down or handed over to bigger powers? An even darker theory suggests that once certain groups within the system recognized the symbolic power, Toninho had accidentally awakened. They co-opted his ritual structure, not to expand it, but to reverse its effects. In other words, if Lucifer had been awakened between the lines, the system needed to reprogram him as the villain once again. And they did it masterfully. Movies about the devil came back into fashion. Furious preachers returned to scream against blasphemous laughter. Toninho vanished, and Lucifer once again became the face of absolute evil. But the symbol had already escaped, and the fire had already spread. A document preserved by Brazilian theosophy scholars reads, "Truth doesn't need a temple. One symbol is enough to ignite a generation." And that's what the system failed to anticipate. Satire became seed. Laughter became ritual. Blasphemy turned into an inverted gospel. What if Toninho's real plan was never to be taken seriously, but to be remembered when it was already too late? Now the cult isn't gathered in one place. It's fragmented, inside everyone who dared to laugh and understand. If this disturbed you, that was the point. Leave a comment. And what if you were never laughing at Toninho do Diabo, but at yourself, reflected in the mirror he held up? This is the end, or rather the point where everything starts again. Because the story of Toninho do Diabo isn't just about a man who mocked religion with irony. It's about a symbol that woke up and continues to multiply in silence. When we laughed at Toninho, we laughed at the caricature. Lucifer never needed followers. He needed mirrors. Mirrors that don't distort, but reveal what lies behind language, morality, and the lie dressed as faith. One of the last fragments Toninho left behind before his final silence read, "I wasn't the devil. I just said what the devil doesn't have the courage to say, because the devil needs to be feared. But me, I wanted to be understood." These words echo like a philosophical epitaph, not of a man, but of an era. An era where laughter became a defense, sarcasm became a shield, and the name Lucifer was once again buried under the weight of guilt. But the symbol survived. Today, across social media, art, tattoos, music, and underground conferences, one phrase keeps resurfacing: the light that burns also awakens. The cult isn't in the farms of Atibaia anymore. It lives in the subtext of culture, in the doubts the system doesn't want you to have, in the faith that survives religion, in the name no one dares to say. And if we look deeper, the final question isn't about Toninho, or Lucifer, or even the devil. The real question is, what part of you fears that light? Because maybe the true hell is the refusal to see what's always lived inside us. Rebellion isn't external. It begins when you choose to open your eyes and keep looking even when all you see is yourself without masks. If this is the truth, why are we still keeping our eyes shut? And if any of this feels real to you, write your truth below.